Hello, everyone. Howie here. Tuesday, January 14th. This is a good one. All right. I got a great article. But before I go into that article, I want to set up the day a little bit. I want to give you a little intro in how I got to this article and how I found it. And also a little, let's say, I want to name the show. Okay. This edition, this episode is going to be My America. And My America is Your America. And I'm going to explain what that means over the show. So I want to start with the explaining how the article that I found today that I'm excited to share with you, how I came to see it. Now it might have been in front of me, but I don't think I would have seen it. And I want that's what I want to explore right in the beginning, the difference of things around us and seeing something. Okay, so a couple of days ago, let me give you some background here. So I started to um, a good friend of mine, Rob. Okay, so some of you know Rob. Rob was on the show early on. He'll be back, and Rob's a wonderful friend of mine, and he's he's a deep guy. He's a spiritual guy. He's also very practical, and he's a big fan. He's in a sense a producer, one of the producers of the show, and he was reminding me. I talk about coaching a lot, and of course, I get coaching too. Okay, and one of the things I get coached about is staying who I am. I have to be me, and just like you have to be you. That's what I preach constantly. So he reminded me that the routine comes first. Routine first, show second. The show is a byproduct of the routine, just like your work really in all of our work, your work, my work, our roles, our husband, being a husband, a father, whatever, daughter, mother, um, stonemason, investment banker, veterinarian, whatever you are, okay, you're a byproduct. That's really a byproduct, okay, of who you are as a reconciled human being. Okay, so part of that routine. So I started to say, I'm really going to put the routine first because without the routine, the byproduct won't come, or the byproduct that will result won't be the one I want. It won't be the authentic Howie. Okay, so I picked up a book, and reading is one of the big things that I do to really try to um, have interior life. Okay, and I picked up this book, and it's called The Intellectual Life, and it's by he's a Dominican priest, and it's written many years ago, and it's by A.D. Serteling. A.D. Serteling. It's a French name, and I'm just going to read like a very small part. Now, it's not that I picked this up just to read it for this purpose. I always have books laying around. And years ago, I used to really read a lot. I don't read as much anymore because I find that as soon as I start reading, I usually get pretty absorbed in something and I kind of just drift off in a good way. So I was reading this, and it's a book about the intellectual life. It's about, let me give you a little background on it. It provides a stirring yet discriminating account of the nature and dignity of the vocation to the intellectual life. It is above all practical book. It discusses with a wealth of illustration and insight subsubjects as the organization of the intellectual's worker's time, materials, and his life, and on and on. Now, the presumption here or the assumption is that the interior life has to come first. So when I opened it up and I'm reading the preface, and this was written, I think, in the 20s, this part jumped out at me. So this is where our journey begins. I'm going to share a couple paragraphs that led me to a couple of other paragraphs in a different book that led me to sitting down this morning and seeing something that I don't think I would have noticed. Okay, this is indeed the principal thing. The mind governs everything. It begins, accomplishes, preserves, finally achieves. Just as it presides over every increase of knowledge, every creation, it directs the more hidden and more searching effect that the worker produces on himself throughout his career. Now, I really want to emphasize that I to me, there's no difference in what he's talking about, the intellectual life and any vocation, any calling to any job, if you want to be excellent. So he says it begins with the mind. And this is the fundamental question. Do you want to do intellectual work? And again, emphasize that um, intellectual in this sense is not just it means that you're an academic. No, it means are you a conscious, intelligent participant in life through the medium that you're given, and whether it's carpentry, banking, stone mason, coach, mother, whatever it is. Do you want to do intellectual work? Here it is. Here's his answer. Begin by creating within you a zone of silence, a habit of recollection, a will to renunciation and detachment, which puts you entirely at the disposal of the work. Acquire that state of soul, unburdened by desire and self will, which is the state of grace of the intellectual worker. Without that, you will do nothing, at least nothing worthwhile. The intellectual is not self begotten. He is the son of the idea, of the truth, of the created word, the life giver immanent in his creation. When the thinker thinks rightly, he follows God step by step. He does not follow his own fancy. When he gropes and struggles in the effort of research, he is Jacob wrestling with the angel and strong against God. So I could go on, and I will return to this book. But this emphasis on begin by creating within you a zone of silence. So taking Rob's advice, because I'm trying to be a good athlete as well as a good coach, athlete in obviously the broader sense of the word, right? A participant in this arena of ideas and culture. And so Rob challenged me. So that to me was no accident that I stumbled upon this. So what I've been doing is that I begin my day when I wake up. I don't touch the phone. I don't touch a computer. I don't touch a laptop. I don't touch anything that's electronic, basically. Okay, except the coffee machine. All right, and I read. I sit. I think. I make notes. And what happens is the time is filled. That's what I did for years and years and years, and I lost that because of honestly because the technology is so tempting. And of course, the show is exciting. You want to see what's going on. I want to jump on Real Clear Politics and talk, but I know. And then in the morning, I go and I have a spiritual routine, and I'm not touching the phone. I'm not touching the phone until about 9 o'clock. I wake up about 5:30. Not touching the phone. Recollection and silence. Old-fashioned paper. And that comes together. And in reading this morning, so that opens, you create space. Okay. This is how I came to this theme today of My America, Your America, and a great article. So by creating space, the Lord, the truth, living wisdom fills the space. So I open up my book, one of my prayer books this morning, and it leads me to the next couple paragraphs. Actually, just one paragraph. Okay, it's out of the breviary, which is the office, right? That monks pray every day, and I like it. A lot of times I just hold the book. I don't read that much. Okay, but there's the office of readings, which usually takes place in the middle of the night, and I was looking at the office of readings, and the readings for this week are from Sirach. Okay, and let's just look at Sirach for a second. Sirach is one of the wisdom books in the Old Testament. The books of Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, the Song of Songs, Wisdom, and Sirach. Those are the wisdom books in the Bible. All right, Sirach, particularly, is this: the book of Sirach derives its name from the author Jesus, son of Eleazar, son of Sirach. Its earliest title seems to have been Wisdom of the Son of Sirach. The designation, it's also called Ecclesiastics. Okay, Ecclesiastics means church books because it was appended to some Greek and Latin manuscripts and was extensively used by the church. Okay, so it's a classic Jewish wisdom book, and the irony is that the author's name was Jesus, not Jesus of Nazareth, not Jesus Christ, Jesus, son of Eleazar, son of Sirach, and that's where the Sirach comes. But you might hear it in some Protestant Bibles. It's Ecclesiastics, not Ecclesiastes, but Ecclesiasticus. Okay. Now in that, this is what I read. It's very short, and it's exciting, and it's an affirmation of all things we've been speaking about for the last 3 or 4 months. Here it is. This is in chapter 11. Good and evil, life and death, poverty and riches are from the Lord. Wisdom and understanding and knowledge of affairs, love and virtuous paths are from the Lord. I'm going to say it again. Good and evil, that's a big span. Life and death, big span. Poverty and riches, big span, are from the Lord. This is the line, though, here. Ready? Wisdom and understanding and knowledge of affairs, love and virtuous paths are from the Lord. Knowledge of affairs jumped out at me. We don't normally associate knowledge of affairs with God's blessing to us. Wisdom and love and patience, the virtues, and knowledge. But knowledge of affairs, what do we do on this show? Right? We're constantly looking. We're searching in culture and every dimension. And we look around, and what we do is we find something and we say to ourselves, this is the politics within the under the umbrella of culture. Where does it fit in? What's the trend? What's the philosophy behind it? Who's presenting it? Looking at the author, looking at the publication, promoting good work, calling out disingenuous postures and false teachings. All right, and knowledge of affairs. So that's how I ended up looking at Real Clear Politics this morning. When I turn the computer on, when I start my day and I use the phone, and now I'm back in the world of technology, I saw something. I saw an article and I read it. I read the whole thing. And because I told you, sometimes I don't read the whole thing. I save it actually to read it with you. But I just kept reading. And it's a topic that I know some friends of mine love. Okay. And I know that. And it's going to be a good one. So, my America, your America. What does that mean? When I grew up in suburbia Long Island. All right. And typical fashion of, I think, suburban Long Island, 52 years old, back in the 80s, right? I was born in the 70s and young child in the late 70s and early 80s. You get a little older. We used to go to the mall. We used to actually take, I'd go with my mother and brother sometimes. But then we got older, it was a town bus, the bus. And we sometimes would take the bus and our mall was called the Walt Whitman Mall. The Walt Whitman Mall, the great poet. Now, honestly, as a child, I had no idea who Walt Whitman was. All I know, there was a team. There was a school named Whitman that we used to wrestle against. Whitman, they were good, and they were part of the Huntington School District, and the Walt Whitman Mall. Okay, and when I grew up, and I was really focused on athletics. I think if somebody asked you who Howie Hain is from that knows me only from high school, they would probably mention some degree of sports. That would be probably the first thing they mentioned. The guy liked to work out and hang out with the guys and wrestle and football, whatever. But right as I began my college journey, I really was I was seduced by wisdom, by philosophy. I just loved it. And religion. I love it. I love thinking about God. I didn't know at the time that I really had this passion. It just kind of went that way. And, I was studying pre-med first. I wanted to be a doctor. And, I got totally seduced by philosophy, and I switched to philosophy, and I graduated, and I was, kind of like not certain what I'm doing. My hair's growing, getting longer. I'm kind of, you might say, a little lost. I am lost, but wonderfully lost. I'm happy. I'm enjoying this journey. I'm reading everything. I wasn't raised in a family that read a lot. Wonderful family, but we didn't read a lot. We didn't talk about art and classical music. No. Um, and I'm exploring this. And at this time, my good friend Sep, okay, Sep is a guy I grew up with, and we grew up in it was a nice neighborhood. We grew up on the more blue collar side of this very nice neighborhood. And Sep's parents were actually farmers, which is very unusual in Long Island at that time. They were from Switzerland. Well, anyway, Sep ended up through wrestling and also good grades going to an Ivy League. And after he graduated, had an opportunity to join some investment bankers out in California. And he asked me, he said, "You want to drive cross country?" And we did. I did. And this great journey, I think the journey of my mind at that time, the Walt Whitman Mall, being a suburban place where you hung out and you shopped, right? Not knowing Walt Whitman, who this man is. I say is because writers are still alive. We're all still alive in one dimension or another. And so when I looked at Walt Whitman, I think to myself, I got to know him by shopping, and I didn't realize it, right? And it was the irony that this great man of substance, the mall, which was maybe the most in the world. I think when people think about America, they think about the materialism and the U.S. mall, the mall, right? It's just such a contrast. So Sep and I begin this journey cross country, and we're listening to good music. We're listening to Dylan. We'll listen to Lucinda Williams, and we get out to California, and I end up staying a while, and I began a career as I started wrote some plays, and I just kept exploring in this world of art and writing and poetry and philosophy, and writing my own works, and years later, I reflected on that, and so I want to share with you. I usually share blogs at the end, but I want to share this one, and that's all going to take us full circle into where I really want to go today and present this article. So remember, let's recap here, right? Because I really want to present something that this show is an embodiment of the philosophy behind it. And I'm a work in progress, and when I'm getting these comments, I'm getting really interesting comments and emails, and friends are people that I know that can contact me directly. And of course, you can contact me directly with the email, right? It's Howie at HowieHainShow.com. And if you go to the channel, you'll see it there. Send an email. It's great to communicate and to learn about who's listening. So let me bring up this article, and so the embodiment of the show, and what I mean by that is that when I talk about things like coaching and improving our lives and handling ourselves with certain levels of dignity, of course I'm included, of course, right? And I'm not presenting myself as being any more advanced than anybody. In fact, I'm probably behind most of you. I'm just doing it live here. So when I got this message of routine, stay healthy, It show's growing. People listen. It's happening. Stay healthy, stay focused. And that routine led me to the book, The Intellectual Life. Reminder to create a place of silence and reconciliation, recollection, which led me to having that space, and the space is filled in by the Lord. And I saw something in Sirach, the wisdom books, and that led me to knowledge of affairs, which was an affirmation of the show, because sometimes you think it was politics. No, but God's involved in everything. Okay. And so here's this, my blog here, and I'm sharing it with you. You can see it. I can tell. All right. So let me look at it. And I always love to stop and look at the little magi, because that's us. That's all of us, right? That's the intellectual life. And I hope everyone sees themselves as an intellectual, no matter what your path is, no matter what part of your body or you use the most in order to work. We're all intellectuals in the sense that we want to be intelligent participants and thought out and understand why we're doing things and how to be better. So there's a little magi searching, right? We're all alone in many ways in that search. If you look closely at that picture, there's actually there's a double shadow of him. that little guy, right? There's one here and there. So it's like there's one actual magi and two shadows. So there's the three magi, which is also here's the fourth shadow, actually, right? The third shadow, one, two, three, and the guy himself. So it's here's the person, and here's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The Trinity is always revealing itself. Okay. That was, of course, unintentional when I took that photo. All right. So this is called Running with the Lord. It's a fun piece. It made me laugh when I read it this morning because I haven't seen it in a long time. I wrote this February 6th, 2018. And it's about my time in San Francisco. So when I got out to San Francisco, I made some great friends. You know, I was with Sepp and I met a bunch of Sepp's guys that Sepp knew, and one guy named Ray. Ray is just an awesome natural philosopher, surfer, veterinarian, and he's one of those guys that you look no matter when I see Ray, and I don't see him too often. It's instant. It's the instant it's the instant connection because of the depth that he wants to live in and does live in, that we all want to live in but don't always achieve because our life sucks us out, right? The busyness. So Ray and Marlene and Chris and a bunch of people, we go hiking, and it was a wild and free life. And this is a blog piece about that. So I hope you enjoy it. Running with the Lord. Okay, and I put a painting here of Cezanne. I love Cezanne, right? And it's Cezanne bather, right? And it's a guy kind of just walking along the water, footloose and fancy free. Paul Cezanne bather with outstretched arms, Yeah, it's great. Like kids walk around like that, right? All right, here we go. Years ago, when I was living in San Francisco, a group of us used to go hiking out in Marin County, just across the giant red expanse of the Golden Gate Bridge. We went often, a group of both men and women, mostly single, mostly without a care in the world. I think every one of us was under 30 or thereabouts. My favorite part was running down. Don't get me wrong. The hike upward was terrific too. That's when we discussed ideas and dreams and laughed almost all the while, breaking up into smaller groups of 2 or 3 or maybe even 4, and then drifting back together like a herd of elk, for they too have not a care in the world, only to once again drift apart, this time usually paired up with a different companion or combination thereof. None of it was planned or had any real intention, of course. It just happened. Laughter, ideas, silence, stops, gazes outward, waiting, speeding up, sipping water, laughter, drifting apart. It was divine. Like the elk, it all seemed to be instinct. But something special happened when we reached the top. After we reached the top, we caught our breath, removed our backpacks, and viewed the scape. After we had eaten a little snack or a small sandwich, something light, usually along with an apple or granola bar, maybe even a small handful of assorted nuts and a few of those purple chips that all San Franciscans seem to love. It was time to descend. My friends used to laugh and say that it was because I'm an Indian. They would go on and on about my Cherokee blood and the fact that the first 3 letters of my name spelled how only served as additional fodder. But there was some truth in it. Not only because I actually do have some American Indian blood, but more so because at that time I was very much a native, primitive, raw, free. That's why I would run down. I loved it. I would run as fast as I could, cutting back and forth, hopping over logs, propelling myself around turns by pivoting hard on the corner tree. I loved it. I loved the way it felt. I loved that my own weight added to the speed, that what normally would slow me down would normally make me huff and puff now drove me forward, propelled me toward whence I came. It was wonderful. I was free. I was free. I was free. It was the closest this man ever came to flying. This morning, almost 20 years later, in urban New Jersey, just across the Hudson River from Manhattan, I went for a jog. They just opened a new circular path around the old reservoir, resting slightly higher than its surrounding cities of Weehawken and Union City. It is very pleasant. I wasn't sure how far I'd be able to make it. And after a very short distance, I thought to myself, oh boy, I'm going to have to stop already. But I didn't. I thought about posture. I thought about positioning of hands. I thought about breath. I quickly realized that the Lord has taught me much. The posture of prayer is important. How we position ourselves is powerful, and breathing is everything. I made it around 3 times. I smiled almost all the way. My pace was pretty good. I did all right. Not bad for a man I thought just a few minutes ago was getting old. I think even newly minted goslings admired my gait. And even if they didn't, it was nice to be in a place to think that maybe they did. I walked a lap and then began to make my way back toward my home, my 1-bedroom apartment that I share with my most recent and 2 death do us part hiking companions, my beautiful, delicately strong bride of 12 years, and my precious little girl, who at 6.5 runs and laughs like the wind. I was a few streets away, coming down 18th and crossing Summit when it happened. I never really noticed it before. The next 2 blocks were a steady, fairly steep decline. I began to run. I loved it. I ran as fast as I could go, cutting back and forth, hopping over the cracks in the sidewalks, propelling myself around the turn by pivoting hard on the corner stop sign. I loved it. I loved the way I felt. I loved that my weight added to the speed, that what normally would slow me down, would normally make me huff and puff, now drove me forward, propelled me toward whence I came. It was wonderful. I was free. I was free. I was free. It was the closest this man ever came to flying. For a moment, I thought I was on the outskirts of San Francisco. That's good memories. And as I'm reading it, as I'm rereading it, I think about the words itself that I wrote, So this was 20 years after the hiking with my friends, right? And now this is another how many years since I wrote it. So I wrote it in 2018, right? So it's another 4, 5, 6, almost 7 years, coming up on 7 years, right? So 20 years after hiking, I wrote this, and then 7 years later, I'm reading to you. And I started with, it's all just coincidence, right? Because when I'm reading this, the part that's jumped out at me is when I was talking about running and how I was getting tired. And I thought to myself, I thought about posture. I thought about positioning of hands. I thought about breath. I quickly realized that the Lord has taught me much. The posture of prayer is important. How we position ourselves is powerful, and breathing is everything. And isn't that exactly what we were talking about in the beginning, right? The intellectual life. Rob's coaching, right? Get your routine sharp. Stay healthy. The show is just a byproduct of a good, reconciled life. And there it is, the posture of prayer. Everything is prayer. Any intentional living is prayer, right? Anytime we're trying to, the intellectual life being the satisfaction and the cultivation of our vocation, of who we are as human beings, as artists. And there it is. That's what I want to talk about today. My America, your America. We're artists. We come from a great tradition, a new tradition. America's a baby in terms of the age. But Walt Whitman, right? Walt Whitman, the Walt Whitman Mall. We can't let that culture be. We can't let the commercial culture capture the great freedom of America. The Walt Whitman. Walt Whitman can't be contained in a mall. Okay. And driving across with Sepp and meeting these friends and going hiking and being free and remembering years later about the power of prayer and posture. And I don't mean prayer, put your hands together and say some Hail Marys, which is fine, of course, a great thing to do. But when I say prayer, I mean what Rob is encouraging me to do and what I'm encouraging you to do, to share it, to push it forward, which is develop that recollection in you. And when we develop that recollection, we have an opportunity to be artists, to be free. I mean, I'm free, I'm free, I'm free. I'm free at last. Thank God Almighty, I'm free at last, right? It's all back to the American freedom and Walt Whitman. Years later, then Sepp and I went back, right? And we were older. And now we're much more conscious. I read a great book on Whitman. Let me bring up the book that I read and show you the article, show you the book. Where's the book? Here it is. Let me share this with you. Let me switch sharing my blog and share this instead. It is a great book here. And if you have a chance, I would really recommend you read it. Here you go. This is Walt Whitman, A Life by Justin Kaplan, author of Mr. Clemens and Mark Twain. Okay. So Walt Whitman, I read this and it's a fantastic book. And you meet wonderful characters, Emerson being one of them. And to learn about that golden age of America, that golden age and the horrors of the Civil War, right? And the time in New York, I love New York. I love New York, And Walt Whitman growing up out in Huntington, that's where I was raised, right? The Huntington Station area, and roughly that area. And then Whitman went to Brooklyn, right? And of course, he would do the Brooklyn Ferry, right? He would cross the Brooklyn Ferry. He has the great poem about the Brooklyn Ferry, and the Brooklyn Bridge would later be built at that spot. It's just New York is a magical place, and Whitman is a big part of that. All right, so let me stop sharing. There's that book. If you have a chance, Walt Whitman, A Life by Justin Kaplan. All right, which leads me to this morning and the search for authenticity, following your lead. And I come and I look at Real Clear Politics. And let me show you what I found here. Let me share it with you. Okay. Show you real clear. All right. And here we go. So I'm looking at Tuesday, January 14th. And you know what? I can tell right away that politics is not really what I'm into. It's just, and that's the emphasis. It's who are you? Yesterday, we had great articles, deep articles. But today's a different day. Today's a day that these Bible verses or these thoughts come into mind and shape the eyes. And I began the show by saying about seeing what's in front of me. And what I saw was, there's the Los Angeles wildfires, President-elect Trump, commentary. We're talking about the Trump's appointment confirmation hearing. But then right here, I love to look here, Tuesday, January 14th, and here's a link of, maybe 10, 12, 15 articles that they're gathering together. And here's one here, how Bob Dylan fought the Proto-Woke. And then I see the name, David Samuels. Do you remember David Samuels? We read a long article by David Samuels on Obama, and it appeared in the tablet. See how everything keeps moving? It's not by accident. Tablet, great Jewish publication. Now it's basically just news for everyone. Still has a Jewish accent to it. And David Samuels wrote this piece for that. David Samuels is one of the editors of County Highway. We spoke about County Highway. County Highway is an actual physical newspaper, and they talk and it's it kind of came out of COVID and the need for people to move around in the American spirit. And I look it up. Look up County Highway. Support them. I don't get anything out of this. I just always I'm always gonna promote and support anybody who's doing good, genuine work, and it's cool. And David Samuels Samuels is a good writer, so I see that and I say, look at David Samuels. And what he did is he wrote for. So I bring up the article, and the article is published in Unheard. So before we read the article today, let's look at Unheard. We always should be doing this. We should be taking the time to see where things are published and who wrote them, who wrote them, who's the author. And we meet wonderful people, Victor Davis Hanson and Barry Weiss, and yesterday Peter Thiel, and okay, we're fed. Now David Samuels. So in Unheard, let me bring up the mission statement. And sometimes when you read a mission statement, they're beautifully written. So let me share this mission statement with you. Okay. This is good. We're cruising today. I've got energy. I'm excited, and we're cruising, man. Okay. So I share this in Unheard. It's a magazine. Our mission. This is a good mission. Just even the mission. It's like poetry. It's exciting. There's so many good things out there, right? Eyes to see and ears to hear. Not just wake up and walk around and see. We have to see things. And like that book said, we need to be reconciled, right? Recollected, collected, remember, right? You have your arms, your legs. You have to remember. You have to bring yourself back together. Remember who you are at the core of your being. Be recollected. Be silent. Create space. The space is filled. God will fill that space. And it doesn't mean he has to fill it with the Bible. Bible's a great thing, of course. But it could be filled with the bumper sticker. It could be filled with a little sparrow outside your window. It could be filled that you're sitting on the couch doing nothing and your cat jumps on your lap. It's whatever it is. It could be, you don't have the radio on. You're not, but somebody driving by does have the radio on and you hear a song. So it doesn't always have to have this spiritual or religious overtone, but it's all spiritual and it's all religious in the deepest, truest sense of remembering that we exist in eternity. The time is just it's the distance between movements, right? And there's a deeper reality, right? The secret to life, secret to life is to spend time in eternity. The more time we spend in eternity, the greater our time. Right? Go with me on that one, right? Many years ago, I wrote a play about Nietzsche, and I used that. I put words in his mouth, and right? Spend life in eternity, and then your life will have more meaning, and there'll be more of it, even if it's not as long. You always win. All right. Our mission, Unheard. When the herd takes off in one direction, what do? Unheard is for people who dare to think for themselves. Let's read it. The Western world is divided and uncertain. In the realms of politics, morality, science, and culture, establishment opinion is skittish but assertive, quick to form a consensus and intimidate dissent into silence. Meanwhile, increasingly powerful anti-establishment voices are fast forming into their own tribes. Unheard tries to do something different and harder. We are not interested in contrarianism or opposition for its own sake, but we make it our mission to challenge herd mentality wherever we see it. This may be to speak for people who are otherwise dismissed, to challenge lazy consensus, or to make the argument for dimensions of existence that are lost in the din. We seek out thinkers who can bring the broader wisdom of history, philosophy, science, and religious thought to bear on the current moment. Does that sound like this show? You see how things just keep coming together? That's like our show. Hey, this is wonderful. We try to give a platform to the overlooked, the downtrodden, and the traduced, and to people and places that the world has chosen to forget. We have no allegiance to any political party or tradition. Our writers often disagree with each other. Our approach is to test and retest assumptions without fear or favor. The effect we hope is to get a little bit closer to the truth and to make people think again. Welcome to Unheard. This is fantastic. Isn't it interesting? Like, well, most of the time we're not even going to open that article. If we do open the article, we normally don't look at the author. If we then or the mission statement. There's so much poetry. A mission statement is so that I mean, basically, right? Thinking is critical. It's critical to think. That's what I have on my first thing. I have a emphasis on critical thinking and the role of thinking and to get closer to the truth. Our writers often disagree with each other. Our approach is to test and retest assumptions without fear or favor. We have no allegiance to any political party or tradition. We have no allegiance. Yes, we have one side we're promoting because right now that those people are promoting the views that I believe in. I think many of us believe in. And if we don't, that's okay because we can disagree. I have defined dialogue over and over again on the show, and I'm going to repeat certain things. Dialogue, right? I speak, you listen. You speak, I listen. That's it. That's dialogue. It's speaking and listening sincerely. It doesn't mean we have to convince. It doesn't mean we have to change our minds. It means sincerely speaking, sincerely listening, and then switch the roles. That's it. An exchange of ideas where you actually are open to listening. That's it. And you speak, Emerson, right? I'm talking about Whitman and Emerson. Emerson had something, I'm paraphrasing, but it's all this life. So many things. And Emerson had a beautiful way he wrote essays and they were very, on the academic or self-reliance. One of his greatest self-reliance, American, the embodiment of what America, self-reliant. Pick yourself up on the bootstraps and work hard. And Emerson's one of he was really effective in inspiring people and convincing people. But you know what he said? And this is where I'm paraphrasing. He said, I don't try to argue or convince people. I tell people what I believe. Isn't that good? Because the power of our belief is the most convincing thing. It is the greatest argument. Belief and faith in something or interest in something that's sincere is convincing and powerful because it's attractive. Attractive people are ones who are alive and living with power. In the power comes from their focus, their enthusiasm. They don't have to convince people to be interested in what they're doing. Their interest itself in what they're doing is magnetic, right? It's true. One of the great examples, children. You watch a child play, it's really great. When they're really absorbed, it's fascinating. I mean, my grandmother used to say, I used to have a Grandma Parker, was my mother's mother, and we had basically like a quarter-acre lot, suburban lot, and chain link fence, and we had one crab apple tree. And underneath the crab apple tree was like a dirt patch. And I used to have a Tonka truck. I loved Tonka trucks, and I used to, and my grandmother, when I was always saying, I used to love to watch you play for hours. I could watch you play for hours. And I always remember she said that. And I know she means that because I could, it's fascinating. Fascinating to watch a child play, but it's one of those really clear examples of what I'm talking about. When a child is absorbed, it's interesting. And it's the same when we're adults. When a musician's on the subway and they're playing and they're really doing it for them, they're doing it for the right reason because they just want to sing. A lot of times they're good, even if they're not good. Which reminds me of this great subway singer in the video of, maybe bring it up last. He sings a Johnny Cash song. And it's one of those great subway moments, a great singer. Anyway, I digress. I don't want to get lost. So that's Unheard. So I love that mission statement. It's great. So let me stop sharing and bring up the actual article. All right. So here comes the article. Here it comes. Where is the article? What did I do? Okay, hold on a second. It's got to be here somewhere. Bear with me, guys. All right, hold on. I'm going to have to do a backdoor here. All right. And here it is. I got it. I can share it to you. Share it with you. All right. And yeah. See, it took a little while, but I got it. All right. Unheard, Bob Dylan. How Bob Dylan fought the Proto-Woke. He refused to be a leftist puppet. Oh, sorry. I say puppet. He refused to be a leftist prophet. I guess puppet. Maybe I should call David Samuels and say, maybe you should put puppet in there instead. That's what came out of my mouth. All right. This is by David Samuels. I applaud him. I applaud his writing. David, Mr. Samuels, if you're listening, I like your writing. And maybe I'll send them the link here. All right. It's lengthy. It says it's from January 14th today. Cutting edge, man. And it's 8-minute read, which we go 100. So it'll be like 800 minutes. I'll read it. I'll try not to comment too much. I'm not going to promise that at all. I like to comment, obviously. All right. Here we go. The American birthright entails both the freedom and oftentimes the necessity of making yourself up from scratch. Many of America's most famous heroes were self-made men, from Benjamin Franklin to Andrew Jackson and Abraham Lincoln. The same is true for the protagonists of America's best-loved tales, from Huckleberry Finn to Jay Gatsby. Where Europeans define themselves both individually and collectively through bloodlines and attachment to the soil, Americans define themselves through a shared freedom from the past in an accompanying license to roam. See how that thing, right? A license to roam. Hey, Howie, you want to drive cross country? Let's go, Sep. Right? Let's go hiking. Let's go hiking. Let's run down the hill. Let's put aside the one manifestation of athletics and biology and then embrace poetry. The freedom to roam like elk. It's awesome. It is the American spirit, and I love it. I love America. I really do. I really love America. I am so happy to be living here. We are so blessed. Such a great country. Where Americans were born and who their parents are has always been much less important than how they greeted the present moment. With one eye fixed on the road ahead and the other on the stars. Walt Whitman's great. See? Right? Walt Whitman. See how it's connected? And trust me, this wasn't copied. This is just because it's organic. I mean, Dylan is the 20th century Walt Whitman. There's no doubt about it. He's the American poet for the 20th century. He is. You want to fight about it? He is. He is. Okay. You want? Yeah. Come on. I'm having fun. Let me take a sip. Wet the whistle, because maybe I'll start singing. Hold on. All right. Walt Whitman's great Song of Myself, written in 1855 and unfolding over 52 stanzas, included accounts of sea battles and slavery, mentions not a single word about the speaker's parents or even what their names were. Song of himself, and he doesn't mention his parents. All the focus is forward. Plus, we love our families too, right? And he had a relationship with his family, but it's the American spirit of pioneers, the pioneer spirit. You know that, guys? We started to lose it. We have lost it, and now we're getting it back. I really feel like we're getting it back. All right, Whitman's Leaves of Grass, in which Song of Myself is contained, is the fountainhead of American poetics, particularly in the 20th century. Its distinctive echo can be heard everywhere after the Second World War, from the beats to the novels of Sal Bellow, to the highbrow confessional poems of John Berryman and Frank O'Hara. In rock and roll music, Whitman's greatest late 20th century heir was undoubtedly Bob Dylan, who eerily reproduced both Whitman's continent-spanning meter and his love of playful self-contradiction. Try reading nearly anything Whitman wrote in Dylan's distinctive nasal tone, and the kinship will be plain. James Mangold's A Complete Unknown, that's the new movie out, is merely the latest of a series of films that have attempted to grapple with the sometimes gratifying, often alienating mixture of freedom and vertigo inherent in the American birthright through the character of the man from nowhere. If the bright side of his character can be glimpsed in Benjamin Franklin's autobiography, arguably the founding work of American literature, which, by the way, that book should be read. Benjamin Franklin's autobiography is a classic. Arguably the founding work of American literature, in Whitman's all embracing comic self, and in the rags to riches tales of Horatio Alger. The darkness that can accompany freedom from the past isn't hard to find either. Natty Bumppo, the frontiersman killer of James Fenimore Cooper's Leather Stocking Tales, is the precursor to the ambivalent killer hero of nearly every Western. Jay Gatsby's invented self is ultimately more loyal and virtuous than the Long Island snobs who attend his glittering parties. It is also lie that ends in death. The character of Bob Dylan, the boy who ostensibly learned to play music from circus performers passing through Hibbing, Minnesota, and then renamed himself after the Welsh poet Dylan Thomas, a fact that Dylan strenuously denied for years before admitting to in his charming autobiography Chronicles. Dylan Thomas, right? Rage against the dying of the light. You know, that's the story that he did like a crazy number of shots in the White Horse Tavern in Manhattan and died. The story's really not true, but he was a huge drinker, a Welsh poet. Rage against the dying of the light. Was more or less fully fashioned even before the young performer set off to New York City to find Woody Guthrie and set the often dreary, earnest world of American folk music on its ear. America has never really known Robert Zimmerman, the man who invented Bob Dylan. It has only known Bob Dylan. So why did the 19-year-old Zimmerman choose to become Dylan? The answer, as he told 60 Minutes interviewer Ed Bradley 20 years ago, was because those are the rules of American selfhood. Quote, "You call yourself what you want to call yourself," Dylan responded. "This is the land of the free." Amen. Amen, brother. Dylan's self-invented character of punk Woody Guthrie, or as a rock and roll Walt Whitman, was wildly influential in his moment for reasons that take a moment to recover. Meanwhile, his best songs have lost none of their immediacy. Working in the genre of original folk music that he more or less invented, he set the rules for rock songwriting for the next half century while writing 2 or 3 dozen major and minor classics that uniquely merited the awarding of a Nobel Prize for Literature, despite the formal and functional gulf that separates song lyrics from novels and poetry. The rules of a Dylan song have remained remarkably consistent over time, bringing together the worlds of Woody Guthrie, hipster downtown New York, American roots music, the blues, country, and western into a kind of primordial soup that Dylan could dip his brush into at will. He created deceptively offhand seeming compositions, governed by a rueful romanticism and a bulletproof intelligence that twists and turns like a fish in order to avoid being caught. You know, I've had so many moments in my life. Let me just a second. You know, as I'm reading, I'm thinking about somebody. You know, when Dylan is mentioned to me when I'm reading, I think about people. I think about Sepp. I think about Ray. I think about Tom Thurgood, Thurgood Masonry. Awesome mason. Builds fireplaces. I think about and everybody in those three and as more are men of substance and authenticity and have walked their walk, right? I mean, Tom. The reason I think about Tom Thurgood is that at the time I was involved in a theater and we were doing work and I met Tom and he's salt of the earth wrestling coach. A man. He's a real man. The kind you want. If you get in trouble and you're going to battle, man, you want Tom Thurgood by you. So Tom Thurgood, is got the radio out and he's got Dylan on, man, and that's it. Hey, you like Dylan? I love Dylan. Yeah, boom. Talk about Dylan. That's what America is. Walt Whitman, Bob Dylan. On the more intellectual side, the Emerson, the self-reliance. You don't have to agree on everything. You're not perfect. Nobody is. You just you hear something real. And what Dylan does, what the poets do, right? It's either a universal message that applies to every individual, or it's a very individual's message, like a story of one person that applies to everyone, to universal, individual to universal, or universal to the individual. And Dylan did it, man. I remember the other thing. This my guy Harold that I met in Germany. He was a cousin of a friend I grew up with, and when I lived in Germany as a young man, I knew him, and he was raising his family in a really cool way. And he shared with me "Blood on the Tracks." Man, he was like, he loved "Blood on the Tracks" by Dylan, and we drank some Hefeweizen, and he and I remember he emphasized, this is amazing, right? This is like 30 years ago, right? 30 years ago, I remember like yesterday, we're sitting in this back room and he's playing records of Dylan, "Blood on the Tracks." And what he played was the line he remembered is, "Time is like a jet plane, it moves too fast." He loved that line. And I remember him loving that line. See, he was interested in that line, and his interest made it interesting to me. And now it's recorded. It's seared into my memory. The power of memory. It's not just this 2 + 2 is 4. I remember facts. No, it's true, deep memory is seared into you, like laid onto a barbecue, and the line is there, man. That's it. Harold, Tübingen, Germany. Time is like a jet plane. It moves too fast. I love it. It is also true that the alchemy by which singer-songwriters, itself an invention of the 60s, do their thing tends to produce a period of startling peak creativity that lasts perhaps 5 years, often precluding the possibility of a second act. The Beatles produced all their great records within 5 years, as did the Rolling Stones. Jimi Hendrix's entire career lasted 4 years, as did Kurt Cobain's. Of course, we could add Jim Morrison to that list, right? And Janis Joplin. It's true about the 5-year stuff. You know what's interesting is that there is a little conflict with this, though, because it does a lot of times writers, though, really hit their at 50. A lot of times writers or poets hit it at 50, whereas in the science and math world, a lot of times Einstein, and a lot of times it's very early. In the early 20s, math and big breakthroughs in math and physics are early stages, or young, and then they do nothing, not much afterwards. Whereas when a big writer is a Tolstoy, it's when you're older, because you need more of a life experience comes together, this convergence point. Maybe it's in the late 30s, 40s, 50s, where you need that. You need to be hurt. You need to have your heart broken. You need to lose things. You need to win things. You need to, right? And then that comes together, where math and science, it's really not about the lived experience. It's more about the analytic understanding and the sharpness of the brain. And at that age, 18, 19, 20, early 20s, things are sharp and crisp. Whereas you get older, things are less sharp, less crisp, but the life experience comes in like a giant wave. And if you stay healthy, that's why the danger of drinking, right? Drinking just numbs you. Drinking, it's a battle, man. And it comes in and it converges into great poetry, great writing, right? Frank McCourt, right? Frank McCourt, Angel's Ashes. He was older, right? It comes together older because he's able to, he was a teacher, and then he writes Angel's Ashes and he moves on. All right. It's also true that so Jimi Hendrix's entire career lasted 4 years, as did Kurt Cobain's. For artists who survive their creative peak, the reward is often an afterlife with lesser access to the divine, part of Dylan's spectacular self-awareness, which has only rarely faltered, is that he recognized the departure of the spirit much sooner than most. He never insisted that his newer songs were actually his best work. Quote, I don't know how I got to write those songs, he admitted to Ed Bradley of the classics he penned at his peak. It's a penetrating type of a magic, and I did it at one time. So he's acknowledging that it was something special in those moments. Bye bye baby blue, right? Just on this, amazing. What's left now, apart from the song, is the distinctive voice, along with a repertoire of feints and dodges, mixed with the occasional lip curling hipster put down. On stage these days, the songwriter is often a nomic shell, appearing to follow an internal logic by which he makes sense of himself to himself. Whatever those dialogues may be about, one suspects that the quote unquote real Bob Dylan, whatever that means, of the singer's youth was a more sharper edged and predatory than Timothy Chalamet's cuddly, doe-eyed portrayal. So now he's talking about the film. Okay, so let's go over that paragraph again. What's left now, apart from the songs, is the distinctive voice. True, right? We all know his voice, along with the repertoire of feints and dodges, mixed with the occasional lip curling hipster put down. On stage these days, the songwriter is often a nomic shell, appearing to follow an internal logic by which he makes sense of himself to himself. I want to comment about that. This is one part of Dylan that I've always admired. I remember Sepp, actually, Sepp and I went to see Dylan at Jones Theater, and he was playing with Paul Simon. And Simon, I believe Simon played first, and I don't know whether he played first or not. I think he did. And Paul Simon sounded just like his albums, just like his CDs. Came out, played, well, it's okay. Paul Simon, same. Dylan came out, played a lot of his classics. They sounded completely different. And people have had a problem with that. They want to hear Bob Dylan songs. I liked it because I don't know. I'm not praising, man. I'm just telling you the truth. I sensed what was happening. He's not Bob Dylan. He's not the same guy. So if he sings like a Rolling Stone at 55 years old, it's different than 25, however old he was when he wrote it. Okay. Freewheeling Bob Dylan at 30 and 60, two different freewheeling guys. Still may be freewheeling, but he's not. I'm not the same. You're not the same. So I respected it. But in fact, I don't, to me, it's more interesting. I'm not a big Stones fan, to be honest with you. And, I'm not impressed, go up and sound exactly the same. People are impressed. That sound exactly the same. I mean, are you exactly the same? Am I going to do things I was doing when I was 25? It's kind of embarrassing, actually. I think the poet has to be him at that moment. The words really it really doesn't matter. It's what you put into the words at that moment. You can sing, let's say, you take Mary Had a Little Lamb, and you take somebody who really translates Mary Had a Little Lamb into like a eulogy for a loved one, and Mary Had a Little Lamb could take on profound, deep meaning, right? Or it could just be a little song. So it's always about the essence of the human being and the passion and the focus into the words, and therefore, by definition, can't sound the same twice. Because no man, no woman is the same twice in the same place. And even if they're in a very similar psychological position, they're older. They have more experience. Less hair. I like that part of Dylan. Whatever those dialogues may be about, one suspects that the real Bob Dylan, whatever that means, of the singer's youth was more sharper edged and predatory than Timothy Chalamet's cuddly, doe-eyed portrayal. So I guess I didn't see the film, and I guess David Samuels thinks that the portrayal is a little too cuddly and doe-eyed, and that Bob Dylan was probably a little sharper, more sharper edged. All right. Still, Chalamet gets the look and the gestures right. He also nicely conveys the capacity for menace that the self-made man inherently contains. After all, if a person invents themselves from scratch, discarding their flesh and blood, parents, and origins in favor of their own self-invented mythos, then how much is the person likely to care about you? Not much. In his portrayal, Calumet is notably faithful to the first and greatest portrayal of the character of Bob Dylan on film, which was by Bob Dylan himself in D.A. Pennebaker's documentary Don't Look Back, which smartly allowed Dylan to do the work of explaining himself. By contrast, I'm Not There, an annoying film by a supremely surface-oriented director, Todd Haynes, a master of a colder type of irony, swallows the Dylan myth whole as some kind of sacrament of modern American selfhood, without understanding or explaining why that should be true, apart from the multiplicity and seeming discontinuities in the pop star's character, which Haynes implies should be respected individually like a family of distinguished drag queens. All right, he doesn't like Hayes. I didn't see either one of those. What Hayes misses and Pennebaker viscerally understood and Mangold clearly imitates without wanting to emphasize it too strongly is that Dylan, in both his music and his persona, found himself at the center of the great intergenerational battle of the 60s over the American gospel of individualism. There it is. Heart and soul of this article right here. Good stuff. Good stuff. So, referencing two prior movies, Haynes doesn't get it. No relationship to me. I'm not a Haynes. I'm a Hayne. No S. What Haynes misses and Pennebaker viscerally understood, and Mangold, the director of the new movie, clearly imitates without wanting to emphasize it too much, is that Dylan, in both his music and his persona, which I think there is almost his music is his persona is his music, which is another. He's authentic. He's called that because he is. Okay, no, we don't have to make this deep or profound. Dylan is authentic, and I think what you see is what you get, and his music reflects that. And therefore, when he performs a song from years ago today, it's going to be who he is today. Plus his artwork, right? I know somebody who's involved with his artwork, and he also produced a good a whiskey. I don't know if it's a bourbon or I had it recently. Somebody gave me a bottle and I bought another one. All right. Is that Dylan, in both his music and his persona, found himself at the center of the great intergenerational battle of the 60s over the American gospel of the individualism. You see, here goes the Whitman thing again, right? Emerson, self-reliance, that transcendental movement in a late 19th century. The American, what really stood out about America at that point, the world had never seen anything like it. That you can invent yourself, and it wasn't based on the land and your nobility and the titles. The land of the free, opportunity. So when we say these things, we have to, right? My land is your land, right? Woody Guthrie. My America is your America, right? Remember how I started the show with that? My America is your America. What that means is it's our America in the sense that it has to be individual stories. So my America is yours and yours is mine. If there are individual stories, the individualism, the idea that everybody is their own self-contained entity is what creates the unity. Right? Everybody is a little mini Big Bang expanding outward. Hopefully. Some burn out quick. Some never actually explode. But the stars, and it doesn't mean they become famous. There are a lot of stars that we don't know about living in our communities who have been expanding their entire life. I talk about this Big Bang analogy a lot, and I love it. I talk to my daughter about it all the time. The greatest part about the Big Bang is that the expansion is not only continuing to this day, but the rate of expansion is increasing. So it's not expanding and then collapsing. It's not expanding and just maintaining. It's expanding. The rate. So in other words, the bang is still taking place. When God said, "Let there be light," bang! It's the echo of the word light is still being It's not even an echo. It's still being said. It's not an echo. An echo would be it's over and we hear remnants. No, the word is let there be light. The word light is still being spoken from God's lips, not spoken and then stopped. The rate of expansion, and that's the growth mindset. If you want to understand what the growth mindset and what the zone is and what flow is, it's living as the Big Bang. It's God when he created you saying, let there be light, and understanding and believing with the core of your being that the word light, like let me pick on one of my friends here, right? Sep, Ray, Tom, 3 people I pointed out today. Let there be Tom means that the word Tom, the name, is never, God never finished saying the name and never will. And if Tom, and if Sep, and if Ray, and if Howie, and if Lori, and if whoever it is, Mary, whoever it is, believes that, and their belief matches the reality that they're expanding and continuing to expand, and God hasn't finished saying their name, then their life is a never-ending adventure. And every day is new, and every day is a new creation, and a new opportunity to start over and grow. That's growth. And when the athlete taps into that reality, they sink the 3-pointers, man. The bat and the ball are it's like a big giant softball, and they just start cracking it. The jazz musician is just in the I think sometimes when I'm doing this, I feel it. I feel now it's good, and it's okay to acknowledge because it's not you. When you're laying those stones, when the numbers are you're cranking the numbers, when you're in the ocean and the wave is hit, when you're running, whatever that moment is. That's why the blog about running down that street, you're back in San Francisco, and instead of swinging around a tree, you're swinging around a stop sign. It's all the same. It's life. A life worth living. The human adventure. Socrates, right? An unexamined life is not worth living. You have to examine and expand. Whew, here we go. For Dylan, the young man from Hibbing, the self that he invented out of his own materials was at once an entirely personal creation, and at the same time represented his connection to a shared vision of America. He was a distinctly American individualist, just as Whitman was, and most great American-born artists are. All right, this is where he starts to make his really good argument. I want to take our time. It's a long, but it's worth it. For Dylan, the young man from Hibbing, the self that he invented out of his own materials, so Dylan invents himself, was at once an entirely personal creation. It's his Big Bang. And at the same time represented his connection to a shared vision of America. It's his Big Bang, and he's acknowledging that there have been others that have had their Big Bang, and they're continuing. He was a distinctly American individualist, just as Whitman was, and most great American-born artists are. The materials he chose to work from were coded in ways that the young Dylan didn't entirely recognize, though. Woody Guthrie wasn't just a great American songwriter who spoke and sang in his own half-invented popular. The way that the young Robert Zimmerman might have imagined him. He was also a member of the Communist Party, which had its own uses for Guthrie's persona and his art. The same was true of the parents of Dylan's Greenwich Village girlfriend, Susie Rotolo, who Dylan credited with educating him about the racial discrimination and labor politics and other subjects that the young singer-songwriter professed to, quote-unquote, not know much about. While the great folk archivist Alan Lomax, whose materials became Dylan's, was not a communist, he was undoubtedly a preservationist who saw folk music not as raw material to be mined and remixed by a future rock and roll Whitman, but the rightful property of the oppressed. So he's bringing up the whole political and social context of Dylan's music and Guthrie's role, right? In other words, as Mangold does a good job of showing, the American left, centered around the Communist Party, used folk music as a cultural banner and as a political instrument. And they were right to feel that Bob Dylan had used them and scorned them. Or to put it in a way more partial to Dylan, the young singer-songwriter took the folk tradition that they had co-opted in the service of their version of Cold War politics and put it back into the place it belonged, which was music. Dylan's sin was never simply going electric. It was in putting art above politics. I love it. I love it. Rah, 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 rah. Yeah. David Samuels. Good paragraph. And it's worth looking at because it's happening today. Right? I speak about this all the time. I really do. I love art. I love writing myself. I love, but it has to be, it's not reactionary. We're not a writer or anybody who's serious about their art. I mean, you can do whatever you want. But to me, the highest level is always has this, it's a personal manifestation of your experience and how you fit in and where you're seeing things and the uniqueness of that. And it's, in my case, because I believe in eternity, the tie to eternity. It's not journalistic. It may use words about stories that are current in times, but it's not simply that. It's not reactionary. It's actionary, not reactionary. It's an action itself that people react to. When you're reacting to things, then your music it's a lower tier. It's serving the politics. It's serving the movement. No, art serves itself. Art serves God, and movements may be inspired by it. You have to decide what you want to do. And so much right now, that's been a major shift in our culture, is how many things have been co-opted to serve something else. And this, like I say, the show is a byproduct of who I am. Yeah, the show should be a byproduct because it's about, I have to be real and the artist has to be real. The show shouldn't be a byproduct of a political movement. No. Just like the artist, their work should be the byproduct of who they are, not reacting in a journalistic fashion to a movement or a political situation. I think the way he said it, he said to put it in a way more partial to Dylan. I think this is much more accurate. The young singer-songwriter took the folk tradition. Dylan enters the folk tradition that they had co-opted. So the Guthrie type, they're the ones who, it was originally just folk music, right? It didn't have any political ties. It was just the idea of people expressing themselves on the front porch. And it's like gospel or even blues, right? It didn't have, you could say it had political overtones because people were expressing their dismay, or the blues, right? I remember a very great quote about Dylan. He said something like, the problem with the blues is everybody's trying to get into them, but people who sang the blues were trying to get out of them. That's a good one, right? People are trying to get into the blues. It's so representative of the rich kid going to art school and trying to become an artist, because they want the persona more than they want the they're willing to embrace the suffering. What a true artist is. True artist is a suffering crucifixion path of crucifixion, a path of pain, and exploration, and overcoming fear every day. Cezanne, I talk about Cezanne as a painter, and there was a line in Cezanne's biography that I read, and it hit me, and it's like, it's true. He was risking his life with every brushstroke. Sounds very dramatic. And at first you dismiss it, but it's like, no, when you're really on the edge of art, you're actually, that edge is dangerous, because you could get lost and become the babbling person on the sidewalk who's stuck on the subway and can't get off. You go too far and you can't get back. So when artists are really pushing, it's in a sense almost dangerous. And that's a lot different than the person who wants to be the artist because they want to look a certain way and they like to hang out with a certain group. It's like people that go into theater because they like the theater group and community more than theater. Right? We always have to ask ourselves, why are you playing this sport? Is it because you really like to hang out with the guys in the locker room, or is it you love the game? And there's nothing wrong with hanging out with the guys and making relationships and having all the other stuff. No, but like, why are you doing it? And this is what this is the cultural aspect that I'm pointing out right now. Dylan did it because he had to. He wasn't doing it to hang out with other people. He's still doing it his own way. He's doing it because he has to. It's his journey. It's his big bang. And there's a crucifixion involved, a misunderstanding, a torment. And some kid showing up and I'm going to grow my hair long and act like, no, that's not what makes it. The young singer-songwriter took the folk tradition that they had co-opted in the service of their version of Cold War politics and put it back into the place it belonged, which was music. Dylan's sin was never simply going electric. It was putting art above politics. In doing so, Dylan turned his back on the certainties of the leftist politics in order to more fully become what he wanted to be in the first place, which was himself. Aside from being a singer-songwriter, who that person was entirely his own business. Quote, I'm a song and dance man, he once told a press conference at the height of the mania surrounding his decision to become a rock and roll artist and release Like a Rolling Stone, Baby Blue, and Visions of Johanna, instead of additional helpings of Lead Belly covers. Neither Dylan nor the gathered reporters seemed able to disguise their glee at the proposition that he could simply make music free of politics or the demands of being a prophet. Quote, Elvis, I could easily see myself as him, Dylan mused more than once, but a prophet? Nah. It is only fair to Bob Dylan, the man, however self-made, to acknowledge how much the decision to break free from the heavily politicized aesthetics of the American left and the expectation and demands that came with it must have cost him, both as a human being and as an artist. The assertion of the greater truth of his own art over the demands of the collective must have been, in many dimensions, a never-ending nightmare. Such was the price of the creative freedom that he sought and gained. That's just what I'm talking about. The crucifixion part, the suffering part, right? The assertion of the greater truth of his own art over the demands. Get away, man. I'm not a tool of your political movement. I'm not a pawn in your game, right? Like he says in his song. He's not a pawn in your game. And we can't be pawns in anybody's game. It has to be real and it has to be authentic. Amen. Was it worth it? For Dylan and for America, the answer is yes. Dylan's legendary basement tapes with the band, which surfaced as a lost corpus of songs from somewhere deep in the American imagination, continue to speak to us now, as much as his albums from his creative peak do. The fact that he maintained his place in the national imagination up through his 80s speaks to a personal strength that is uniquely visible now and makes it possible for his music to be heard by a new generation. In an era in which cookie-cutter leftist politics similarly declares its preeminence over the aesthetic whims of mere artists whose job is to bend the knee and crank out shepherd fairy-like propaganda in the interest of the party, Dylan's struggle again resonates. Amen, amen. Dylan himself would most likely have as little interest in being portrayed as a refusenik against the demands of proto-wokeism as he would in continuing to sing workers' protest songs. He was more interested in being Elvis. Yet his example feels especially potent now for the obvious reason that we are once again living in an age when the threats to the integrity of the self and to artistic expression from both the left and right are very obviously real, and it takes real courage to say no. Dylan's triumph in that fight was total. No one has ever been cooler than Bob Dylan, and no one since Walt Whitman wrote better lyrics that encompass more of the American spirit. The folkies who wanted Dylan to continue to play acoustic music and demonstrate for core, and who saw albums like Blonde on Blood, Blonde on Blonde, or Blood on the Tracks as portrayals of the party line, are plainly ridiculous figures, even as the present day kin are easy to spot. For those who knew Dylan and who in one way or another had reason to see themselves as his peers, Dylan continues to represent the highest mountain in their American songwriting. Jimmy Webb, that the great American songwriter, told me once of meeting Dylan at a party, whereupon Dylan pulled out a guitar and played Jimmy his version of Wichita Lineman, a Jimmy Webb song that could have also perhaps have been written by Dylan. When he was done, he looked at Webb expectantly. Quote, "What, now I'm supposed to play one of your songs?" Webb shot back. It's weird to think that at 83, Bob Dylan is as relevant as ever to the country that gave him the freedom to invent himself. But it's plainly true. That's because America remained his greatest inspiration and the place in the mind where he was always most at home. As he explained it obliquely in a long poem he wrote upon the death of his hero. Here's the poem. You can touch and twist and turn two kinds of doorknobs. You can either go to the church of your choice or you can go to Brooklyn State Hospital. You'll find God in the church of your choice. You'll find Woody Guthrie in Brooklyn State Hospital. And though it's only my opinion, I may be right or wrong. You'll find them both in the Grand Canyon at sundown. David Samuels is a writer who lives in upstate New York. Well, there it is, guys. There it is. It's a beautiful piece, isn't it? I think we'll leave it there. I think I'm inspired for the day. I think this is the path the Lord has put me on today, and it's my pleasure to share it with you. And go back to the beginning, right? To find that place, that that place to recollect yourself, reconciliation, peace, and silence. Let the Lord fill it up. Let him bring something else in, right? That confirms who you are, right? Knowledge of affairs, which leads you to look at the headlines and see something. And today, right in the middle, right? Right in the middle of all those political articles, boop, there it is. Great piece of writing, a real article, not just a AI generated news blurb. A real article about a very real man that makes us think about who we are. Who are we as artists and poets and troubadours? The great Bob Dylan. Time is like a jet plane. It moves too fast. And that's been it for us today. So I will talk to you soon. God bless you and have a great day. I'll talk to you.